Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. Thank you very much for coming. It's a miserable night, but in here it's joyous. So, good. Thank you very much for coming. And welcome to this, our 48th annual general meeting, amazingly. I haven't been at all of them, but I think Felicity, you might have been. And Roger? Would that be right? Without putting any...
We missed one.
You might have missed one. Okay. Oh, really? Okay, well done.
Last year, I'm pretty...
Okay. Apologies I've had from Steve Gray, Kim Etherton, Sarah Brown, Michael Jossam and Michael Perkins. So without more ado, if I can carry on with the business of the day, you hopefully have had all the details through on your notice, and the first resolution is really to approve the minutes of the 47th AGM held on the 28th of July 2020. They are on the chairs, I think. I appreciate that they were not sent out because we were saving paper, and also they are actually extremely short because it was our remote AGM and the topics covered were fairly short, so hopefully that's okay. Could I have a proposer to approve the minutes? Thank you, Margaret. And a seconder?
I'll second it.
Thanks, Sally.
I can't remember.
Thank you very much. And can I have a show of hands to approve? Thank you. Any dissenters? Carried. Thank you very much. And now I'll hand over to Paul to talk us through the accounts.
Thank you, Viv. My role is to cover items 2 and 3 on the agenda. So first of all is for us to consider and then hopefully approve the annual financial statements. They've been in your notice for the meeting. They were placed on the website, so hopefully you all had a chance to read them in depth. And I have a set available here if needs be. What I was going to do is just take you briefly through some of the main points in the accounts and just sort of highlight some of the differences from one year or another. You should have had on your chair a little treasurer's report, which I'm going to take you through tonight. And on the back of it, there is a summary of the results for the last 5 years. So it just gives you a bit of a feel for how the organisation has progressed in terms of income, what sources of income, the expenses, and whether they made a profit or a loss. I'm not sure whether anybody has any accounts with them. You don't need the accounts necessarily, but I was going to refer to start with, in terms of income, to page 8 of the accounts. Don't all rush for that page. And to just go through some of the income categories. So first of all, in relation to the legacy side of things, you'll see from the summary that we haven't received any legacies in the last 2 years, which is a great shame. And we did receive a legacy of over £116,000 in 2019. What we've been trying to do, it's great to get legacies, and what we've been trying to do is try to live and survive on our income streams to match our expenditure. If we get a legacy, we will try to use it where possible for particular projects or funding particular things, depending what we think is needed at that time. So we continue to pursue legacies, but unfortunately haven't had any for a while. In terms of donations from members, member subscriptions, corporate subscriptions and donations, we've had over 57,000, which is the two categories on that page, and a similar amount in the previous year. And that's really good in this day and age, I think, to get that level of support on the island. For Wildlife Limited, which is our trading subsidiary, which is the shop, that again has made a great contribution, despite the fact the shop has been closed for a period of time in the year to January 21 because of COVID. With all the changes which were needed, we've produced a dividend of £26,500, which is excellent. Last year, or the year 20, we received a dividend of £36,000, which is by far the largest we've ever had. So 26,000 in the context of what's happened in the last year or so is very, very good. So thank you to all the people who work in the shop, all the volunteers. Without their help and support, we would not be making that sort of money. So it's a fantastic contribution. Grants and sponsorship income is going to 135,000 this year, compared to 112 the previous year, but a big chunk of that has been support from the Isle of Man government for COVID. We were able to request assistance for some support from the government like many other organisations, so that's been extremely helpful and we're grateful for their support as well. Consultancy income has been a good source of income, and that's grown, as you'll see from that chart there, in terms of we used to only a few £600 in 17, that's grown to over £90,000 in the last year. A lot of that has been, again, due to COVID and the restrictions on bringing consultants and people to the island for travel, so organisations have needed to use a local organisation to do some of this work. We continue to service that work at the moment. We hope it will remain. We'll continue to keep the work we've got, and that because the borders have opened, people won't be coming in, they will continue to use us. We have good expertise, and we hope that that will grow and continue again. Contract income, which is for us managing the car from Manx National Heritage, has been over £50,000 again, so that's continued and continues in the current year. Fundraising, despite COVID, back to the COVID word, we've raised over £18,000 in this year, which is excellent considering it's difficult to organise any event whatsoever. So that's been brilliant. So that's sort of a quick summary of the income. On the expenses side, you'll see from the chart there it's 379,000 compared to 362,000. Though our costs have gone up a bit because we've employed more people to do the consultancy work to help on that side of it, to manage the various projects we have. Again, what we're trying to do is match the levels of income with our costs. So whatever staff, we try to generate that level of income to support those costs. So as a result, please report a profit of £8,500 for this year compared to a loss of £27,500 the previous year. So that's a really good result. And I think some of the COVID support has really contributed to that in a very difficult year. For the current year, 21-22, we're budgeting deficit of £25,000–26,000. Hopefully we will come in better than that, and hopefully, I don't think we'll break even, but we'll be better than that, I hope. So that's page 8. Page 10, which is the balance sheet. The Manx Wildlife Trust had large asset values which are locked into our fixed assets and heritage assets, being the Peel property and 25 of our nature reserves. So they are fixed, we can't do a lot with those. So the other part of the balance sheet mainly is the cash funds we have, which are the funds which we need to live on as our working capital. And that's about 200 and something thousand pounds. We would like to grow those funds because it enables us to do more and budget better in the future. So we continue to try to find ways to grow those funds. VAT is the last item to mention. I'm not sure if you've got to page 21 of the accounts, note 19, the last one, but that explains that we needed to register for, or we should have registered for VAT back in December 2018, and we've had a pretty hideous time in the last few months dealing with the VAT registration, going back over the period of time to do a very long VAT registration period, and the impact on the accounts is set out in that note, and it's cost us something like £6,500 net. So that's explained within the accounts. So that's a quick run through. I don't want to take too much time on a fascinating subject of accounts. I'd just like to thank everybody on the Finance Committee who's helped me, and Charlotte Poynton, who produced the accounts and deals with all the management accounts, etc. So thank you for their support. It really makes a difference to my role. And really remains to say, are there any questions? Happy to try to answer them now, or if you want to nod me afterwards, if you don't want to ask right now, but please feel free to contact me. Is there any questions from anybody? Deathly silence. Okay, thank you. So the item 2 of the agenda is to consider and hopefully approve the accounts. Can I have a proposer to approve the accounts, please? Thank you. And a seconder? Thank you. Everybody voting for the accounts, please raise your hands. Thank you. Anybody against the accounts? No, thank you. So the resolution party accounts are approved. We can now file them with the Charities Registry at long last. Item 3 on the agenda is to approve the reappointment of Moore Stevens as auditors and their remuneration in such terms as approved by Council. Moore Stevens has been our auditors for quite a few years, and they continue to support us at a relatively low level of fee from a standard fee. So anybody propose the reappointment, please? Thank you, Felicity. And a seconder? Thank you. So all those for the resolution, please raise your hands. And anyone against? Great, thank you. Resolution passed. Thank you for your time. Hope I haven't kept you too long. And back to Viv.
Thank you, Paul. And, as always, a very clear explanation. And I know you keep saying that they're probably the drier of the subject, but they're very, very important because they're the lifeblood of how we work. So thank you very much. And can I particularly thank you for all your work over this last 12 months to 18 months, which has been very, very difficult.
Thank you.
So thank you. It's a fantastic help to Manx Wildlife Trust. The next item is not an item on the notice as such, but I do want to just at this point refer to the fact that we will be losing two of our trustees, Sally Bolton and Paul Crocker, and they are both stepping down from council this year, and I want to say a huge thank you to both of them for the work they've done and the support they give us. I'm very pleased to say that we're not going to be losing either of them totally, in the sense that Sally has become a director of Wildlife Limited, and Paul, I'm sure you'll be very much involved in some of the agricultural aspects that we'll be working with. So thank you for past help, and I look forward to future work with you, and that's very well done. Item 5 on the agenda is really around the re-election of our members of council who were co-opted onto council on the 29th of March. I appreciate that you haven't got a lot of background to that, and in fact it's coming afterwards because I will talk you through it, but suffice to say that we have recruited a number of new council members to help us with our governance structure, and for the purpose of this section I would like to propose that they are re-elected onto council, having been co-opted on the 29th of March. They are David Alvey, Amy Amido, Stephanie Foxton, Stephen Gray, John Hunter, Sophie Pearce and Paul Thomas. Now we can run through them one by one, or if I may, can I ask on block if everybody's happy to take them forward in that way, and if you are, could I have a proposer that they are elected onto council? Thank you, Graham. And a seconder? Thank you, Sally. And can I have a show of hands, please? Thank you very much. Any dissenters? Brilliant. Thank you very much. That's approved. And thank you to all of those people who are now just being re-elected. That's fantastic. In addition, we have two people who have done 3 years already on council and I'm very pleased to say are standing again. Simon Kane and Roger Pullen. And again, could I have a proposer? Thank you, Paul. And a seconder? Amy. That's brilliant. And can I have a show of hands? Thank you very much, and welcome to another 3-year term, Simon and Roger. Thank you. Okay, so at that point, if I may, I'll hand over to Simon.
Viv's asked me to take the next two resolutions. Firstly, because the next resolution involves Viv, who served 9 years on council, and under our new articles and the old articles, she would therefore have to step down now, unless we allow her to stay on an extra year, and she's happy to do that, I believe. And she's going to stay on for the time being as our chair as well, I'm very glad to say. Therefore, we need to formally resolve to approve her to stay on this extra year. So therefore, can somebody propose this resolution? Paul? And anybody to second it? Amy? Thank you. So, all in favour? Thank you. Anybody against? No? Thank you. Now the next resolution I will also take. This is a special resolution requiring 75% of those attending today to vote in favour. This is to adopt a new memorandum and articles of association. I just want to give some background to this. First of all, thank you to Sally, whose firm helped us draft this document. So the AGM a year ago, which was held under very difficult circumstances, highlighted a few problems with the existing memorandum and articles and prompted us to think we should probably renew them. One of the issues we realised was that you couldn't attend or vote by proxy, which seemed slightly unusual. We also realised that we had no provision for having any meetings electronically, by telephone or by Zoom or by any other electronic form, which is of course something which is now done on a daily basis. So we updated it. At the same time, some of you involved in any charities on the Isle of Man may know that there's a new statute governing all charities registration and regulation on the island, and this came into effect last year. And under that Act, there is in fact a new model form of articles for all Isle of Man charities. So we decided to basically adopt that. It involved our objects clause being slightly redrafted to fit into the new statutory provisions under that new Act. So you may have noticed that there's a slight change to the way in which our objects are set out. But otherwise, I'd call it a sort of updating exercise, nothing particularly more than that. If anybody, does anybody have any questions about the new memorandum and articles? If not, can I ask somebody to propose this special resolution?
I'll propose it.
Sally, anybody to second the special resolution? All in favour? Thank you. Anybody against? Thank you. So the procedure is that has to be filed with the company's registry and the Attorney General, but those new articles are now in force. Thank you.
Thank you, Simon, and you are probably pleased to know that concludes the ordinary resolutions for the meeting, but they are very important, and thank you for making the time to come and talk to us and look at them today. As Paul said and Simon said, if you have any questions, please have a chat afterwards, or if you think of something later, it doesn't matter, any time, drop an email to us and we're very pleased to go through it, because it's not always easy at a meeting, I appreciate. So thank you all very much for that. Now, if I may, I will give my report for the year and take the opportunity to update you on some things that we've already actually agreed to, but give you some background to why they've come about. Can everybody hear me okay, or shall I stand up? You all right? Okay, at the back. Okay. Well, first of all, it's a real pleasure to present to you this report as chair, and it's even better to do so in person, I have to say. It's much more... We've got very used to Zoom, haven't we? But at the same time, it's nice to actually meet people and have a chat and to present to an audience. It always amazes me when I look back to the beginning of the year under review, in this case way back to February 2020, at how much has happened in not just that year, but in the intervening period from its conclusion up to the AGM. It is a hugely rewarding exercise, confirming as it does the significant work undertaken and the enthusiasm, dedication, and actually resilience of MWT staff and volunteers. 2020-21 was Lee Morris's first year in the post of CEO, and you'll be hearing from him next about what an extraordinary year that has been. It leaves me to state some of the headline achievements and to express my sincere thanks first to Lee for his drive and good human pragmatism when facing the various challenges presented. Such challenges are always significant when taking on a CEO role, but even more remarkable when faced within 6 weeks of starting with the first COVID-related lockdown. Unprecedented. You can appreciate the difficulties of getting to know your team and the trustees by remote means with very few opportunities to meet in person, so a tough time. An early priority, as outlined at last year's AGM, was to produce a new strategy for MWT, taking us forward from 2020 and setting those ambitious targets essential to help us to deal positively with others on a pathway to address the issues of biodiversity loss, climate change, and people's disconnection with nature. The final version of the strategy was set out in last autumn's magazine and is available on the website. This was no small feat, and I extend my thanks to all involved, especially Lee, who has brought another dimension to MWT's work and purpose. I hope you've had a chance to read it. I have a copy here if you want to have a look. But seriously, it's an important document for us, and please do have a look. It's on the website, as I say, as well as in the back copy of the magazine and on our bookmarks. If you have got questions, a little bit like I've just said with the accounts and anything to do with the M&AA, if you want to have a talk about it, post the formal part of the business, please do come and have a chat. I'm very pleased to say that the work on the strategy is not stopped as we continue to develop it and the underlying delivery plan while implementing certain elements as we go along, and also, of course, prioritising and reprioritising as resources allow. We knew that to deliver the ambitions in the strategy and to step up to face the crises facing our world, MWT needed to revise its governance structure to be even more nimble and provide additional support and expertise when needed. We needed to supplement our council with trustees who possess additional required skill sets. Our approach was radical in as far as MWT has never publicly advertised for trustees, and this is what we did with outstanding results. When the window for applications closed at the end of January, we had received over 30 applicants for 8 positions. We're now into the current year, but it's appropriate, I think, to continue both to provide some background, but also to emphasise how important it is to position MWT for at least the next 10 years and to make the real difference essential to achieve our vision. From Council, the trustees selected an interview panel comprising, in addition to myself and Lee, Kim, Rachel and Simon. A huge thank you to them for the many hours committed over February and March when, due to a further COVID lockdown, we carried out the selection process and interviews via Zoom, another first. We had an extremely difficult job sifting through high-quality applicants, first down to 20 and then down to the final 8, who joined MWT as directors on the 29th of March and who thankfully have been re-elected tonight. I'm pleased to say this process has had a huge spin-off benefit, as several applicants who, although not successful due to the outstanding quality of the field and the few places available, have still engaged with us and are actively involved in committees and groups. This is a massive boost. So thank you so much to all those inspired by what MWT is doing and intends to do and have joined us to achieve our ambitions. COVID meant that for several months, Lee and the staff worked from home or when able to do so on site, progressing work commitments and ensuring projects were kept going if possible. Particularly in the early part of the year, our volunteers could not carry out most of the huge range of of work that MWT relies on them to do, ranging from muckers on the reserves to those in the shop. So a massive thank you to everyone for not only persevering through those times, which, for many were difficult personally, but also, and very importantly, for coming back as soon as restrictions lifted and got on with things. So, it's massive. Thank you. Safety concerns remain paramount for all those involved in delivering our objectives, and we have been reacting and will continue to react as quickly as possible to the advice and instructions provided by government to keep everyone safe. I've only got 15 pages to go. However, given the difficulties caused by COVID, and I know that's come out a lot, but you'll understand why, opportunities have also been created. Working from home is now the norm, which has many advantages, although making the office an attractive place to work when appropriate is also important. Note that for tidying the office. Additionally, although personal contact has reduced, the frequency and extent of interaction, albeit remotely, has developed hugely. One example of this is our participation in the work and processes of the wider Federation of Wildlife Trusts, which enables us to tap into a huge reservoir of knowledge and experience. As members, we can all enjoy wildlife presentations on YouTube, enabling engagement in ways we barely really considered previously, and I would encourage you to look at them. They're very, very good. If I may, I will finish on a personal note. I have been a trustee of Manx Wildlife Trust for over 9 years, as Simon mentioned, including 5 as chair, and in accordance with the resolution just approved, I'm happy to continue for a short time more. This extension is to achieve a transition to a new chair, to be decided, who will be part of the team to build on what has already been achieved, an exciting and demanding prospect. However, at this point, I want to put on record my grateful thanks to the many people I've had the privilege of working with, and by virtue of the role itself, meeting with over that time. From my own experience and knowledge, I hope I've added some value, but I know I've gained much more. Whilst I have always valued and enjoyed nature, my eyes have been open to the natural world to an extent I would never have thought possible. I've enjoyed being involved with so many people of like mind. It has been stimulating, hugely enjoyable, and provided an insight which very few other roles can provide. I strongly believe that well-known acronym TEAM, Together Everyone Achieves More, sounds a bit naff, but at the same time it's really meaningful. Every individual can help in some way if they're encouraged or empowered to do so. And with all the amazing people involved with MWT, whether as trustees, staff, volunteers, partners, donors, members or supporters, I have great optimism that we'll achieve our vision by protecting and restoring the wildlife of our wonderful island and its surrounding seas. Thank you all very much. Over to you, Lee.
To applaud. Thanks, Viv. I do have some printed copies of this, and both mine and Viv's reports will go onto the website afterwards, but I've purposely not shared them so that you're not all cribbing me before I go through. And I'll try and give the highlights. So, 2 points of note. First of all, the magazine that Graham's been working on, I've seen drafts of it. We've decided that for the first time we're going to have a Manx Wildlife Trust published annual report, and so the magazine's got annual report this time with papers from all the conservation officers with all the stats and tables and charts you'd like to see about the impact that we're having for Manx nature. So that's coming out, and that will include a more flowery version of what I'm about to give the edited highlights of. So something you can pull out of your magazine and keep forever as a Manx Wildlife Trust impact report for the year. So with that caveat, this was my first year, and also this report ends officially on the 31st of January last year, so we've done an awful lot since the 31st of January. And I'm not really going to touch on much of that in what I'm going to say now. I'm going to try and stick to within the bounds of the reporting year, but I might put a brackets in. So, coronavirus, yeah, it was amazing. I'm personally looking forward to decoupling coronavirus from my experience in the Isle of Man, because I'd only been here a few weeks and we went into lockdown. So for me, COVID-19 is the Isle of Man. Now, it's been a lovely place to be for lockdown and COVID, because I know we've had a much better deal than, maybe not Centolina. Centolina, and they touch wood, they never had a single case. But I'm looking forward to decoupling it. Just been in the room tonight, when we're sat in a room together, is a step forward. You know, my nephew came to stay last weekend. Sorry, I'll talk too much. But COVID-19 was definitely a thing for our team. It was a challenge, but I think the whole team responded really well in terms of how they reacted to that. And there's an element of trust, but I celebrate the fact that I don't have a team of people who I have to worry about being motivated to do their work. You know, they may need guidance, counsel, a bit of negotiation occasionally on what the priorities are. But in terms of them getting up every day and working hard for Manx Wildlife Trust, I don't have to worry about that. So I think for other organisations, home working was far more of an issue than it has been for me. Nevertheless, still a challenge. And as Viv said with the strategy programme, we launched into that through Zoom, and I think it was a good process, and I believe that we've come out with a document that's credible, and we always said it would give us the top levels that we'd go forward with, on the basis that this year we knew that the wider Wildlife Trust strategy was going to be produced, and it's in final draft now. But we're both sort of quite smug, aren't we? Because I got an advanced steer of the way it was going last March, and pretty much we're on point. So we're probably the first Wildlife Trust out of the 47 that's clearly got the 3 goals that the rest are about to launch early next year. So that's nice, but it gives us a chance to hone it up. So the strategy worked. The staff team development came from that, and I hope this is something that I brought to Manx Wildlife Trust. In having staff team meetings, work programmes, appraisal scheme. We've got a pension scheme now for the staff, which is something that we've not had before. So all those things of what I'd call base camp alpha for HR management. I think we're not perfect yet, but we've come a few good steps down the track in that reporting year. The trustee recruitment that Viv's already talked about, I really enjoyed that process. It's lovely when you have that process and all these interesting people. So thank you and welcome personally to the new trustees. I should mention Rachel Hartnell. So Rachel Hartnell officially handed a notice in February. So officially it was the next year, but we should mention Rachel Hartnell at the AGM for all the work that she's done for the gift shop. And Ansley, who's at the back now, is a person we never thought we were going to find. We thought Rachel was irreplaceable, but we're all hoping that we've replaced her. Well, the fact that you've even put your hand up, Ansley, to step into those shoes is fantastic. And seeing the boxes surrounding Ansley today was great. Funding and finance, one of the first things that I was very clear on with the team, I think in my first team meeting we had, was that money's not a dirty word, and we shouldn't be embarrassed about asking for money because we're not going to pay shareholders, we're going to invest it back in Manx nature, and money's not a dirty word. And I think that culture is developing well. I mean, even simple steps as getting all the team members involved in setting their own budget so they understand the lines in their own budget. So we're not perfect, but we've come again down the track for that. A big thing for me personally is partnership working. It's something I've always believed in, and I think for a small wildlife trust to work with it, we can't achieve what we want if we're going to just do it on our own. We have to work collaboratively with others. So there's been quite a drive this year, completely, what's been, I'll praise Viv up towards the end, but what's been nice for all these things that I'm hoping I've added, but I also think there's been things that Viv's been saying that the wildlife trust has wanted to do for years, and I've gone, yeah, that's perfect, that's just what I'd like. So I think between us we've been very much, we don't often disagree, do we, Worry?
No.
Unless you allow me to get away with it. Maybe
No, we don't.
We
Get
don't.
on.
And so the partnership work has been key, and just some of the ones this year, I've come from cultures in other organisations of memorandum of understanding. An understanding is that you're friends, you're going to do things together. If that develops, you then get an agreement, it'll be an annex of specific outputs and KPIs that we're going to do. But we've got MOUs now with some good organisations, notably the Manx National Farmers Union. And on that, I'll just say, because I sense that for some members, maybe not in this room, working with farmers, working with large landowners, maybe even working with the wildlife park who keep animals in cages, maybe the shooting fraternity. There's lots of people, the property developers. There's lots of people that potentially in the past were almost the antithesis of who a wildlife trust would work with. But for me personally, and I've landed at a time in the wildlife trust movement where the concept of a nature recovery network, bigger ambitions, how can we actually impact on nature on a bigger scale, requires some degree of pragmatism and some degree of working with people that may not have been natural allies in the past. However, I want to go on record at the AGM as the CEO saying that doesn't mean that there are not clear red lines for us and clear areas that we're going to disagree on that we won't cross. And I think the Manx National Farmers Union is a really excellent example of how we're building an alliance for Manx nature. We've got written in our MOU that we're going to disagree. I've never written an MOU before that actually says we're going to disagree occasionally, but that one does. And I think that's important. But one of my colleagues at the back, David, who's joined the team now, sadly outside this reporting year, so I'm sneaking him in as a bracket. But 88% of the Isle of Man is agricultural land. Our nature reserves cover 0.2% of the island. They're fantastic special places, but 0.2% is not good enough for Manx Wildlife Trust. We have to impact on more than 0.2% of the island. So farmers, landowners, other people's backyard, all those big areas of land, if we can link those together and drive that, then we can have far more impact. A small baby step there. So Manx National Farmers Union, Manx National Heritage, we had a very public signing of an MOU with Manx National Heritage in the House of Manannan. We'd built up, and I built up personally, a good relationship with Edmund Southworth. So I was quite sad when Edmund said he was going to retire. I've met his successor now 3 times, Connie Lovell, with Viv last week. And it's early days for Connie, but of course we're positive about it and the ambition. But I think the Calf of Man, Manx Wildlife Week, Manx Biodiversity Recording Partnership, the Balaf Curragh, there's some key projects for Manx wildlife that intrinsically we work and need to work with Manx National Heritage on. So important partner, and hopefully the MOU is the first step. Manx Whale and Dolphin Watch, Manx Basking Shark Watch and others. And then a variety of other organisations, ENGOs who we want to work closely with, because if we can't work closely with them, then rarely how are we going to convince anyone else to do it with us. So that's been a key drive. The Isle of Man government, important relations with the Isle of Man government, the fact that we have, me and Viv turn up to regular and quite frequent meetings with the Minister, the directors, the heads of department in DEFA, is significant. And I'm not going to say they couldn't be better, of course they could, but we're at the table. Again, we're at the table having the conversations. We've been meeting senior civil servants at the highest end in between PERDA, or during PERDA and to the end of the elections, and they won't mind saying, basically saying, what do we want from the next DEFA minister? How do we align? How do we do it better? The Manx Nature Conservation Forum, which is all the ENGOs, there was a survey done of all the members of that forum last year, and we were part of the instigators for that, thankfully, and that has come out with recommendations that I'd certainly support. Maybe along the Scottish model of having an environment link group, a Manx environment link group, but how we work with the NGOs to influence government and be a challenging friend, I think is the right term. So we can be a challenging friend, and we are, and be DOI, DESC, the Department of Enterprise, who we had 4 or 5 interns from this year, wonderful young people who did great things, and hopefully we've helped their careers. So fantastic link with there. Environmental Educators Group, we were the catalyst for, so all those NGOs now that work in environmental education now come together. I think we've had 4 meetings there. So again, positive, and we're already looking with 2 other organisations now to put a joint funding bid in for an educational project that's directly come out of that. Viv's already talked about myself and Viv engaging with the wider Wildlife Trust movement, and it's fantastic federation. Next week I'm actually going off island for the first time since March last year to attend a CEOs and Chairs conference in King's Lynn, would you believe? But I'm just looking forward to going in and meeting other people face to face. And the good thing about that in terms of COVID is that there's no PowerPoint presentations. We are going on visits, we're having workshops, because we've done all the PowerPoints online all through the year. So when we go to the place, we're actually going to do interactive outdoor things together, which is a lot better use of time. So that's good news. On a global scale, most of you will know that I moved here from the island of St Helena to UK Overseas Territories. We're part of that club with the Crown dependencies. So we're now members of, and we joined in this reporting year, the UK Overseas Territories Conservation Forum. Myself and 2 other colleagues presented at the conference this year about the work of Manx Wildlife Trust, the seals, the peat restoration. So we're on a global scale. And whereas I go to meetings, or we go to meetings within the wildlife trusts, and we're one of the smaller wildlife trusts, it's almost like the Isle of Man's here, how nice. But when we go in those meetings, we get, wow, the Isle of Man's here, you've got like a biodiversity strategy, and you work with the government, you've got all that money and people, and you're in. So we have a different role in that global UK Islands network, and that's actually quite a lovely network to be in. Graham behind the camera and his new assistant Ray have done a fantastic amount in the time of this year to increase the presence of Manx Wildlife Trust brand. And little simple things like, me chucking badges at, our badge should be there. We should be out there. We should have a leaflet in all the places. We need to be on the steam packet ferry. We need to tell people about these things. Digital, massive spike in digital. Graham says he's not an IT expert, but he's more wise than I am. And we all go to him for IT support. But, just a few of the digital highlights of this reporting year. A brand new website that actually has a .im URL, which is important. We need to have we don't need a UK URL, we need and we've got an Isle of Man URL. We've got a fantastic spike in our social media. We ran a live webinar Wild Night In for members, first time, again using Zoom. Dawn Colley, our education officer, who's just won the Biosphere Award, brackets. Did a series of education films during COVID that were recorded and watched by lots of people who were sat at home homeschooling. We did our magazine digitally. We even got a first online shop selling branded t-shirts, and if you haven't got one, you really should, from Rapa Nui. So you can go online now and buy a whole plethora of branded t-shirts. And we even ran the House of Manannan exhibition, which had only just opened before COVID lockdown. That went online, and we were selling the piece of work. So a massive spike in digital, and I think all our colleagues have learned to use the computer far, far better than they did. But even beyond digital, generic leaflets, I've said, the stickers. And my last point on that is we made a conscious decision, and I was fully behind and pushing on this, that we are now shouting from the rooftops that we are proud members of the UNESCO Biosphere. Because we need to do that, because and certainly my rhetoric would be we have to make that work. It's a fantastic enabler for collaboration. I can work with any organisation and we'll do it under Biosphere banner, and I don't see it as something that we expect government to do. I see it as something that it's all our responsibility, and Biosphere is something that we can make work. So that's come across all our communications as well. We've rebadged or rebranded our our visitor centres into nature discovery centres. Now, we haven't quite got the recipe rolled out yet for capacity and whatever, but it's coming. The first step in that is that we want to go from them being a visitor centre to a discovery centre, and we very much engage, and there's people from north and south in the room. We engage with the people that run those centres before we change the name, and that's the direction. So it's more about hands-on and enjoying nature. Volunteers. Key challenge that I've set myself is to find us money for a full-time volunteer coordinator, because I think that's something that could have massive impact for us in so many ways. We have lots of great volunteers who do amazing things, and I think we could add a huge value to them by having a volunteer coordinator beyond Sarah Hickey, who fits it in when she's in between cornflakes and coming here because she's doing lots of consultancy and surveying peat for 7 days a week. So but within that time, she's still managed to do a new volunteer spreadsheet, a new handbook. She's launched a volunteer leaders group. I think it's met twice, and we relaunched our generic Manx Wildlife Trust Volunteer Awards in the reporting year, and we've got the next ones coming through this year. So there's been some action around volunteers, although I don't know how Sarah's fitted that in. In education, we were again grateful to the Isle of Man government for extending our contract for another year. And we would very much hope that we don't have to go last minute on that in subsequent years. That's been 2 years now, where we've gone right to the wire. In fact, we've gone over the wire, and then we've had a 1-year extension on our desk and DEFA contract. Dawn's not here, but she does an amazing amount of work way beyond the contract. It's the best value they'll ever get for 14 grand a year. It's fantastic value, and we need to really work hard at ensuring that we can cement that. But to mitigate the risk, we started to develop education programmes away from schools. And in this reporting year, and some of my background is adult education in botanic gardens and zoos and colleges. So I was keen to look at adult education. We ran a taster day, an adult education open afternoon. Myself, Graham and Andre and Jane there were back, and several of us ran an open afternoon, and well received, great feedback. And they ticked all the boxes to tell us what courses to run. It was ace. So then we ran Wildlife Gardening, Wild Observer and Magnificent Meadows, and I'll tell you about that in next year's report. But brackets, they were successful. I'm nearly there. I got around all 24 nature reserves, even during lockdown, and we have a very, very interesting set of pieces of land. And again, brackets, we're looking forward to some discussions about Manx Wildlife Trust land going forward in November, and we've got some workshops planned for this year. In our terrestrial work, Wildflowers of Man now is we're still working with DEF on the Wildflowers of Man project. The terms of reference were redrafted and re-agreed, and that now has a focus very much towards the Ramsey Forest project more shortly. In fact, right now. So Ramsey Forest has been a project for Manx Wildlife Trust on a rolling 3-year contract with DEFA for a number of years. We were approached by the Rotary Club of Douglas, and centenary of Rotary in the Isle of Man is in 2 years' time, and they were looking to fund a major forest project, and they've been put in contact with us by DEFA. The long and the short of it is that they've agreed to put a 6-figure sum towards the Ramsey Forest project to enable us to turn that into something amazing. And that money is on the table. Me and Graham have met. The first domino, the big domino to fall, is that we need to get long-term tenure of the land beyond 3 years to a 99-year peppercorn lease. It's gone through ministerial approval with DEFA. Every indication I've got is that now, post-election, any day, I'm told. Viv's got toes as well, Viv. And then that will become next year and onwards a key project for us, how we can develop that. Milltown, for example, are on board. We've got Milltown have agreed we can park at one end. We've got the hairpin car park being built, so we've got access both ends. Anyway, that's for next year. But it's going forward. Action for Wildlife remains a core project for Manx Wildlife Trust. M&H and DEFA being key partners, the Currachs and the Ponies on the Heath being top of the list, but 10 key projects predate me that were identified as priority habitat and species conservation projects for Manx Wildlife Trust and the island. I'm delighted, and I know Viv's delighted as well, that once more through this strategy process, wildlife sites were again an agreed priority for Manx Wildlife Trust. And then subsequent to that, we've had David's joined the team, and again there'll be a bit more in the report next year about that, because there's a potential solution and enthusiasm and previous history in that. So the wildlife sites are back on the list. The agri-environment scheme, we tendered during the reporting year for the Islands Agri-Environment Scheme, and with the banners in the corner, we were successful in getting it. We started delivering it, but again that's a bracket, because more on that in next year's report. Upland peat, 30% of the upland peat now has been surveyed by Sarah and a probe, and we've also been developing around other carbon, is the carbon offsetting programme with one of our DFE interns, a guy called Simon Sheath, who's now actually gone to work for KPMG, and we're hoping that link is there, and we're part of an island solution to carbon offsetting that links very much to tree planting, agri-environment, etc. In terms of marine, there's been lots of additional funding and links with marine in the reporting period. First of all, we revised our KPIs for the DEFA work, and that funds Lara for 1 day a week. Lara Howe, our marine officer, Dr. Lara Howe. We've also liberated some freshwater funding that was in reserved funds for a number of years. We've now generated some freshwater conservation projects. We got funding from an American foundation called Dr. Scholl, also from Sea Changes for seagrass work. Lara's also done significantly more consultancy work, and we've taken on, which for me as a scuba diver is fantastic, we're now the Isle of Man coordinators for the Marine Citizen Science programme called Sea Search, which is run by the Marine Conservation Society, and they're paying us about £5,000 a year for Lara to coordinate that. Now, that's now allowed us to recruit a marine assistant, so we now have a marine team of 2, which is lovely. Irish Sea collaboration. We're part of a wildlife trust group now that England, Ireland, Scotland, Wales, Northern Ireland and the Isle of Man are all coming together to have conversations about conservation of the Irish Sea. It's the first baby step in all those nations coming together. Because for years, certainly in the Wildlife Trust, it was just Cheshire, Cumbria and Lancashire that met as the Northwest Living Seas without the other nations at the table. So now we've got them all there, and we're hoping to facilitate meetings here. We drafted a calf research strategy. That's subsequently gone on to a later programme, a later draft. And as I said, we've had positive discussions with the previous M&H Director, Edmund Southworth, about the development of a long-term partnership for the calf of man to prevent the need for us to repeatedly tender for delivering the bird observatory, but also because we had so much added value and we can bring funding and long-term research projects and student projects, etc. So, and that's part of the discussion now that we and I are having with M&H. Viv's already talked about the ecological consultancy. I do believe in synchronicity, and not long into my tenure we had a meeting, and Graham will remember it, and a few of us sat in the meeting room and did a SWOT analysis of our consultancy and agreed that it was a big opportunity for us to expand, and then COVID opened the door for us. So we decided to expand and rev it up a bit. COVID came along, it suddenly meant that all the people we wanted to convince to come and do business with us had no other option. So we're hoping that if we're doing it right, and I believe that we have, that does give us a base. But again, I want to go on record that yes, the money's nice. Yes, we're not paying it to shareholders. It's allowing us to fund conservation work. It's allowing us to fund action for wildlife. But actually, beyond that, we are now inputting directly. Manx ecologists are the people who are delivering the ecological consultancy for Manx projects. Now, if I didn't have my job, who would I want to do the ecological consultancy for Manx development? Well, I'd want Manx ecologists to do it. So I think the same with the agri-environment. I think we almost have a duty to put our heads above the parapet and make sure it's done properly. And that's what we're doing. So, I'm done. So, exciting times ahead. There's already been exciting times since officially this report ended in the 31st of January. Again, thanks to all my colleagues, trustees, volunteers, but particularly to Viv, who some of you will know I praise up a lot. I certainly, when Viv interviewed me alongside Paul, I did, you know, I'm at a place now, I bought into you. But I'd particularly like to thank all of you that just voted to extend it for another year.
Yes.
No, I think amazing, Viv, thank you. But thank you all, and I hope that gives you a flavour. There are some written copies there, and the whole thing will go online, but please do read our full annual report in your magazine at leisure.
Thank you, Lee. And that concludes the meeting. So thank you all for coming. Please hang around and have a chat. I'm not sure I think we've drunk the tea and coffee, haven't we? Or is some downstairs?
There is some.
There's some. Great.
Stewing mostly.
No,
Okay.
Sorry, I'll just chip in. There is downstairs. There is tea and coffee and more sort of communal seating. So if you would like to stay for a drink and you've got time, just downstairs you can do that.
And please nab us for a chat. But also, if you have got questions, email us, telephone us. Who knows? We might even have a meeting. So, but thanks for coming tonight.